continues to play an important role by providing the necessary support. This must continue. We welcome the establishment of a committee to follow up on the recommendations of the Republican dialogue and to offer strategic guidance to the presidency. We reiterate the significance of this process and underline the need for making it as inclusive as possible. We also commend the increase in deployment of public officials throughout the prefectures and the efforts towards the gradual extension of the state authority. We welcome the endorsement by President Todera of a national security policy and a national strategy for security sector reforms, emphasizing governance, accountability, and coordination of actors in the security sector. Mr. President, we commend the steady progress made towards the local elections with the conclusion of the electoral mapping by the National Election Authority of Central African Republic. In line with the commitment expressed by the government to hold local elections in 2023, it is important that necessary legislation is passed in due course to enable other formalities to follow. We underline the importance of for the international community to support these efforts and to provide necessary support so that these elections are held as planned. Despite the progress being made, the security situation continues to remain volatile. Armed groups continue their relentless attacks against civilians, national forces, and MINUSCA peacekeepers. They continue to dominate mining sites and impose illegal taxation on the civilian population. Security violations of the peace agreement by armed groups have again increased in the last 4 months, and we unequivocally condemn these violations and attacks. It is important to be vigilant and ensure support to the government so that the gains made politically are not undermined by unlawful activities of armed groups. The DDRR program must see further success, for which sustained financial and developmental support by partners will be necessary. Mr. President, we are concerned by the deterioration of humanitarian situation in the country, which has been aggravated by violence, rising commodity prices, fuel shortages, and severe flooding recently. The displaced communities, including those taking refuge in neighboring countries, continue to suffer. We urge for the scaling up of humanitarian response efforts to expeditiously meet the needs of the vulnerable and displaced. The implementation of status of forces agreement need continued attention, particularly movement of peacekeepers. Both mission leadership and the government need to take further measures to ensure safety and security of peacekeepers. We also call for swift action on part of all stakeholders for expeditious implementation of the provisions of UN Security Council Resolution 2589 to bring the culprits to justice and establish accountability of crimes against UN peacekeepers. In this regard, we have taken note of the 28 ongoing investigations by national judicial authorities into attacks against peacekeepers. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Central African Republic needs our collective attention as it navigates a tenuous journey in its pursuit of peace. The worsening economic and fiscal situation, compounded by the global rise in prices and shortage of essential goods, is bound to make this task more challenging in the days to come. On our part, India will continue to support the Central African Republic and its people in their quest for peace, stability, and economic development. I thank you.
I thank the representative of India for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to start with the words of thanks to the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ms. Valentina Rugabiza. We thank you for your briefing. We also welcome the participation in this meeting of ours by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Central African Republic, Ms. Sylvie Baipo Temon, and the permanent representative of Rwanda to the UN. The situation in the Central African Republic, according to our assessments, is relatively stable and is overall under government control. The country is working on ensuring state presence. Administrative structures are being strengthened. There's a continued reform of the security sector. The demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration of former combatant program is being implemented. The judicial system is being developed, and there is preparation work conducted to local elections. At the same time, in some regions of the countries, government forces still have to confront a number of illegal hostile armed groups. We are convinced that the unnecessary bloodletting has to stop, and that the leaders of the fighters must reject the methods of combating with force and start a full dialogue with Bangui, because there is no alternative to a political and diplomatic settlement. One way of ensuring stability here is to go in with the Khartoum Agreement and the Luanda Roadmap. We need to underscore here that the Central African authorities, despite everything, are ready for an inclusive dialogue so as to overcome security issues. And the September meeting in the capital of the CAR was a very good confirmation of that. We also note that the mechanism launched at the initiative of the CAR mechanism, the coordination mechanism, continues working with UN participation. This platform allows for the monitoring of progress in the political track and coordinates the efforts made by Bangui and the international community. We welcome the active involvement in the process of helping to the political settlement by the International Conference on the Great Lakes region and the Economic Community of Central African States, and the important role played by the African Union. We welcome the work played by the UN Mission on Stabilization in CAR. MINUSCA is an important factor of ensuring security in the country, one of the main elements on countering the armed groups and protecting civilians. We are convinced that the comprehensive implementation of the mandate by the peacekeeping mission can only possible provided there is a trusting dialogue and mutual understanding with the authorities of the country of deployment. We would like to thank the military personnel of contingent contributing countries who risk their lives on a daily basis as they discharge their duties. And we would like to convey our condolences to the families and loved ones of the peacekeepers from Bangladesh who died on the 3rd of October. Our condolences also go to the government of this country. It is our view that long-term stabilization and moving forward with the political process is impossible without extending assistance to CAR in enhancing the fighting capacity of their armed forces and law enforcement. They bear the main responsibility on defending their country and protecting its civilians. We are helping and assisting Bangui in this area. We note that there is a need to further modify the current sanctions regime on the CAR. It is our view that the arms embargo should be should be fully lifted. And this is something that the African representative advocate, the A3 in the Security Council, for example, in African Union as well, and also the International Conference on the Great Lakes region. And this is something that the Central Africans keep talking about themselves. In conclusion, we would like to yet once again comment the statements made by some colleagues when they address the interaction between Russia and Central Africa. Our position here is very well known to one and all. We have voiced it on many occasions during Security Council meetings. In this country, there are military instructors. They were sent there at the request of the government of the CAR and in line with international law and with the knowledge of the Security Council 2127 Committee. This cooperation provides significant outcomes in training the armed forces of the country and stabilizing the situation in the country. Now, as regards the choice by states of partners in a given area, well, this is a sovereign prerogative of national authorities, as is the issue of investigating human rights violations and IHL violations. As a diplomat, I do understand the national interests of France in Africa and the emotions that push her representatives to make statements similar to what we heard today. But I do not understand what it is that France is expecting to obtain by constantly repeating the same disinformation, which is sounding particularly cynical, taking into account France's involvement in the region historically publicly, and the accusations of crimes that were levied against the French military, in particular in Central African Republic. In Africa, they all know and remember all that very well. I can only say one thing with certainty. Such statements, even though are supported by the well-known support group in the Security Council, do not help stabilize the situation in the CAR in any way. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for that statement. I will now make a declaration in my capacity as the representative of Gabon. I welcome here among us today the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the CAR, Her Excellency Ms. Sylvie Valérie Baipo-Timon. I also am delighted to welcome to this meeting the permanent representative of Rwanda. We thank the Special Representative Valentine Rugwabiza for her enlightening briefing. I must recall that I am making this statement on behalf of the 3 African countries that are members of the Security Council, namely Kenya, Ghana, and my country, Gabon. Dear colleagues, we first of all wish to convey our deepest condolences to the government of Bangladesh and to the families of the 3 peacekeepers in MINUSCA following their passing on the 3rd of October. We also wish a swift recovery to those wounded. We condemn all attacks against MINUSCA personnel, and we denounce the growing use of explosive ordnance in CAR by rebel groups. Moreover, we recall that attacks targeting the United Nations Blue Helmets are liable to constitute war crimes. We invite the Central African Government and MINUSCA to conduct inquiries and to ensure that the perpetrators of these crimes are held accountable before the courts. Dear colleagues, the Central African Republic has taken great strides forward. The country resolutely continues its journey towards the lasting stabilization of its territory. However, the support of the international community remains crucial in the face of the political, security, and humanitarian challenges which face the country on its journey. On the political front, we welcome the fact that last June there was a strategic review meeting which made it possible to redefine the modalities and timeline for the implementation of the political agreement through the ICGRL joint roadmap. The participation of national and international partners at this meeting lent greater legitimacy to its work. The A3 also welcome the coordination meetings held for the follow-up of the process of the implementation of the Luanda Joint Roadmap and for the follow-up of the implementation of the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation in the CAR. These meetings were held in September and October 2022 in Bangui. This regular follow-up of the implementation of the peace agreement demonstrates the commitment of the CAR authorities to settle the political crisis in the country. We underscore here the clear interest expressed to involve the largest possible number of participants in the effective implementation of the peace agreement. Political stakeholders, civil society, men, women, young people, and signatory armed groups, they all wish to get involved in order to ensure the sustainability of peace endeavours initiated by the government and supported by the international community. In this regard, the A3 welcomes the active role played by the African Union, ECAS, and the ICGLR in lending momentum to the CAR's peace process. We are convinced that military action alone will not be enough to pull the country out of crisis. The existence of a political arena for dialogue is vital for the restoration of lasting peace. We welcome the implementation of the Committee for the Follow-up of Recommendations which stemmed from the Republican Dialogue and the Bangui Forum. The Bangui Forum and the Republican Dialogue and the ensuing committee play a major role, namely in the implementation of recommendations, and contribute undoubtedly to establishing trust between all stakeholders. We note the progress made in the field of human rights. We point here at the holding of criminal hearings in the Appeal Court of Bangui and Buea and the hearings of the Special Criminal Court. We also laud the support that MINUSCA extends to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We take note of the decision taken by the Constitutional Court on the 23rd of September to declare null and void the decrees leading to the creation of a committee responsible for drafting a new constitution for the CAR. The court subsequently declared void the decision to appoint the members of that committee, and we welcome the government's decision to uphold these decisions. The completion of the electoral mapping exercise and the review of the integrated plan for security of the forthcoming local elections are clear expressions of the CAR's will to guarantee credible elections. However, significant financial and technical support from the international community remains a major asset in guaranteeing that peaceful, transparent, and democratic elections are held. Dear colleagues, in terms of security now, the A3 encouraged the CAR's authorities to continue efforts underway to tackle armed groups. The commitment of the CAR's armed forces and the gains made on the ground merit praise. However, it is vital that the support of the international community in restoring the state's authority across the country goes hand in hand with the implementation of quick impact community development projects in order to improve the living conditions of people and to break the cycle of dependency. At the outset of my statement, I made this very same point. The armed groups continue to impede the security of Central African people by sowing chaos and regularly attacking civilians. Recently, they've also used explosive ordnance, namely in the center and west of the country. We welcome MINUSCA's work. Their tangible action is being noted by the people. MINUSCA undoubtedly contributes to the protection of civilians and to the stabilization of the country, namely thanks to its robust posture and to its quick reaction force. We remain convinced of the need to increase the operational capacity of MINUSCA through the provision of human resources and equipments commensurate with the new threats arising on the ground. Moreover, we state that the training and capacity building exercises to help the defense and security forces need to be increased, namely in the field of demining. For as long as buyers continue to hunger after the natural resources of the CAR, the blood of innocent Central African people will continue to run. The time has come to put an end to this cycle of violence and to write a new page in the story of the CAR. The certification and traceability of minerals, as well as shoring up the security of borders, are sine qua non for the fight against armed groups. These challenges are not challenges which the CAR can overcome without the support of partners. We particularly encourage cooperation between the CAR and its neighbors to counter illicit cross-border networks. Civilian populations are the primary victims of the illicit trafficking of minerals in the Central African Republic, despite the fact that these civilians should be the primary beneficiaries of these materials. Drying up the sources of financing of these armed groups is vital. They profit from the illicit trafficking of natural resources in the CAR. The issue of their financing is vital, and this was recalled during the extraordinary summit of the African Union held in Malabo in May 2022. We welcome progress made with the implementation of the Disarmament, Demobilization, Reintegration and Repatriation Plan, and the surrender of more than 4,500 combatants out of a total of 7,000. We ask all rebel groups to join the peace agreement without conditions and to take part in the DDRR program. Restoring peace in the CAR requires continued financial support from the international community, particularly for the DDRR process. It is vital that the CAR authorities have financial means in order to offer alternatives to former combatants. We welcome the efforts of the Security Council, efforts that have allowed a significant lifting of the arms embargo. We welcome the many measures taken by the CAR government to strengthen its weapons and munitions management system against a particularly difficult economic backdrop. Here, we particularly welcome the launch on the 29th of June of an arms marking program as well as an awareness-raising program on the part of the National Commission for the Fight Against the Proliferation of Small Arms and Light Weapons. It is incumbent upon us all to support the Central African Republic's armed forces because, as we know, MINUSCA has an ad hoc mandate. The mission will ultimately